And we're back. What is this now? Episode 3?
4? 3?
I guess 4 or 3.
Episode 4, and we still don't have a name, guys. We're getting top tier founders and talent on here, and we still need to come up with a name. But no, we're super excited today to be joined by Lucas from Jito. Jito is one of the standout startups on the Solana blockchain. They're innovating in a major way, and we're here to chat everything Jito, liquid staking derivatives, Solana DeFi, and much more. So we're very excited to have you here, Lucas.
Sweet. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about all that stuff you mentioned and whatever else comes up.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll just kick it off maybe with more of an open-ended question. Logan used to work at Tesla. I heard you did as well. How did you transition from Tesla into crypto and Solana specifically?
Yeah, so I did like a brief internship at Tesla back in like 2015. Worked on the Model X, so the one with the Falcon wing doors. Did some programming on those, and basically anything that like moved or lit up on the car. And then so yeah, I was kind of like working in like embedded systems and firmware. Discovered crypto in like towards the end of the 2017 cycle, when like stuff was just going up like crazy. Like Litecoin was like doubling in a day, and like Verge and VeChain and all that stuff. So that's kind of my intro to crypto. Kind of stayed up with it during the bear market. So like 2018, 2019, 2020, discovered MEV in like late 2020. I read Dan Robinson's article in the Dark Forest, basically how there are these like bots that are, you know, looking at the mempool and looking at the Ethereum blockchain and seeing what trades are taking place, and you know, making trades. And it's kind of like this like new age high frequency trading in some way. So yeah, I kind of just like fell in love with that, and then ended up writing a MEV bot. That was kind of my like first intro into programming and like interfacing with the blockchain, and kind of just like fell in love with the MEV space. There's a lot of smart people working in there, a lot of cool problems. It's kind of just like a
rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, it's a very, very deep rabbit hole. Yeah, I feel like you could just keep going on and on about MEV and like just keep learning about it, and decided that was kind of the best way to dive in.
I would love to float just as a to set some context around, like, I think a lot of people are fairly familiar with the concept of MEV on Ethereum, right? And understand to some certain extent when they're trading, someone else is sandwiching them, right? And like someone is pulling a little bit of juice out of each trade, each transaction. Would love to just hear some of the high level differences in MEV on Ethereum versus Solana.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, you know, Flashbots is pretty big right now. Before Flashbots, basically every trade was going through the public mempool on Ethereum, so you could see other people's trades and, you know, predict what was going to happen and kind of react to it. And then Flashbots came around, you know, basically realized that there's kind of this problem that there's a lot of wasted block space on Ethereum and all that stuff. So they came out with MEV Geth, and then now we're kind of on PBS now. So I think Solana, it's pretty similar in some ways. You know, there's a lot of bots looking for opportunities across all the dexes. There's a few like main differences in MEV on Solana versus Ethereum. The major one, well, I guess there's two major ones. One is that it's so fast. Solana has a 400 millisecond block time. Ethereum's like 12 seconds. So you know, your location in the world matters a lot. You know, I think the latency from like Texas to Japan is like 100 or 200 milliseconds. So that's essentially like half your slot time on Solana. So you have to be pretty fast. So yeah, the latency there is important. And then the sheer number of transactions going through Solana is also way different than Ethereum. I think the average Ethereum block is like, a few hundred transactions. On Solana, it's like a few thousand, and the block time's way shorter, just high throughput chain. The other super interesting thing that Solana is like way different from all the other EVM chains and just every blockchain, at least as far as I know, is the continuous block production. So on Ethereum, there is the block time, 12 seconds. Basically, you have 12 seconds to build this block. You have all these builders that are building these blocks and whatnot. And basically, the highest payer is taken after 12 seconds. On Solana, it's basically constantly producing the block. So during your slot starts, you might emit some transactions in that block 20 milliseconds in, 40, 50, 100, 200, 350, 375, all the way up to 400. So that makes it's more of like a high frequency trading system where you have to be pretty fast, and you can't build the whole block up front.
Do you know if any other high throughput chains currently stream blocks in like real time?
I'm not super familiar with the architecture of other chains like Sui or Aptos or anything like that. I don't know what Monad's planning to do with that, but as far as I know, Solana is the only one.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like, I think that's like, it's pretty cool because it's like more of like a video stream, or it's like a smooth video stream, versus like Ethereum. It's like, in all the other chains, it's kind of just like choppy, like you're just submitting these giant things at one time. Solana, you kind of have this like steady state stream of transactions.
In a perfect world, I mean, you would get the block times as low as latency as possible, correct? Just, I mean, the longer the block times, the higher the likelihood for MEV capture.
Yeah, we've seen this a little bit. There's a group on Twitter, I think it's Special Mech or something, and they're showing when there's like a ton of volatility on Binance, the Ethereum block time, it's lagging like 12 seconds. So you can have like really large SexXR there.
I think one of the main things, just building on the Monad side, in like doing research to understand what MEV will look like on chain when it's up and running on mainnet, understanding the difference between like where the majority of MEV currently comes from on Ethereum versus Solana, right? And I think Ethereum is a lot of sandwich attacks, right? But if the main DEX, or like the main way that people are trading, is via central limit order book instead, it takes out a lot of like the inherent MEV that's possible there, right? So like trading super tight spreads on central limit order book, you're not able to sandwich attack nearly the same way that you can on an AM. That's more or less?
Yeah, for sure. I think like Solana definitely exposes less MEV, and we are building MEV infrastructure, but I think it's a reason to be bullish on Solana is that it exposes less MEV. You have better exchange technology that you see like in the traditional like central limit order book world, and then you have AMMs, CLMMs, all the other stuff. I think another thing is that we haven't really seen any sandwiching on Solana yet. So, most of the MEV we see is arbitrage. I think another thing is like, as far as I know, most people just trade through Jupiter, and aggregators in general are like the best way to avoid MEV. Typically, they don't leave, it'll pull liquidity from multiple sources as much as it can, and it tends to leave less arbitrage on the table. So users get way better pricing.
One thing I wanted to get a little bit more into, I mean, we could continue down the MEV rabbit hole, but just on terms of the amount of stake that you guys have been getting recently, congrats. I think every VC is looking for that kind of hockey stick growth, and you guys are great examples of that. I think kind of tried and true, just putting one foot in front of another day after day and kind of grinding on that. It's been awesome to see the recent success.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been, I think post FTX, everyone was like pretty upset and all that, but I think there's a lot of super dedicated people on Solana that didn't let that like ruin their trajectory and actually like doubled down. Like we definitely doubled down on Solana, and you're starting to see that pay off now.
Could you talk, I mean, for the people on Twitter or Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube that are listening, a little bit more about like what you're offering with your stake product, kind of like walk people through the flow?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess Jito Labs builds MEV software, and then we're also contributors to Jito Stake Pool, which is liquid staking protocol in Solana. There's a liquid staking token called Jito SOL. And essentially it's, normal staking, you're essentially locking up your capital on a validator and you don't have any liquidity. So with liquid staking, you basically deposit SOL into a liquid staking pool, and that pool will mint you a liquid staking token, which basically represents the initial capital you put in, plus all the rewards that you get from inflation. Our I guess variation or like improvement on that is the addition of this like MEV validator client. So trying to make sure that like give incentives for stakers to stake to MEV enabled validator clients and receive some of the MEV happening on chain. I think if you look at Ethereum, I think a few months ago, I don't know what it is now, but I think the MEV rewards were like 20% of the APY. Much lower on Solana, but I think, if DeFi takes off, then hopefully it'll get there, or maybe a little underneath that. So yeah, the goal is to like have a super strong validator set, make sure you're supporting good validators and delegating to them, and then also provide users the opportunity to receive some of that MEV. And then it also helps like bolster the Solana DeFi. We've seen the impact of like STETH and like RETH or Rocket Pool ETH on Ethereum and DeFi.
Absolutely. I think it's been a major 0 to 1 moment getting some of those LSTs fired up. And I think it's something that Solana's definitely been looking at as well. And I guess a question around that, why many people have kind of speculated on this, but why do you think the LST adoption remains so limited on Solana relative to an Ethereum? I mean, there's the obvious argument that not 100% of the coins are like on chain immediately because Solana didn't do an ICO. But from your perspective, I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few structural reasons. I think one is like Ethereum didn't have withdrawals for the longest time. So, if you wanted liquidity, Lido is kind of the best way, and started to see others pop up as well. Solana has a 2-day withdrawal period, so it's pretty fast to get your stake back if you need it. But I also think that no one's really like nailed like the messaging for liquid staking on Solana yet, and I think that there hasn't really been any like super technical liquid staking products yet that are like well marketed and well branded and kind of lean more like institutional, and that's kind of what Jito is doing.
I think I was going to say, I think from that side as well, right? I would say for your average retail user who transacts on chain, but isn't necessarily like a developer, understands all the nuances, right? They understand, I have SOL, and I can go buy an NFT here, or I can trade it for this token here. But they're not like truly on the builder side, right? They have like a base level understanding of on-chain transacting. In their mind, they're probably like, oh, if I have, this bank of Solana that I want to hold for a long time, right? I'm going to go stake it, and I'll get my liquid staking token. That's great. I'm getting some yield on it. But if I want to actually use Solana to trade and buy NFTs, essentially trade, right? Like that's kind of the main use case on chain right now for a lot of these different protocols. Solana is like the core asset that you use to do that. Do you think that a path forward, right, like as LSTs become more adopted, right, and people kind of see them, like, do you think that people will start to see them as the native asset, and like protocols be built around having the core asset be a staked version of Solana instead of just SOL, the native token?
Yeah, 100%. I think, I think as we see, like kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, where there's a lot of like super dedicated and talented teams on Solana that are continuing to build more DeFi protocols, I think liquid staking will be, as those DeFi protocols come online, they will start to realize like, hey, we can attract this liquid stake Solana and, boost our TVL and usage and volume and fees and all of that. So I think that we'll definitely start to see that more. I mean, I think there's probably even a world where you could like pay for gas and liquid staking token if you want to, which I think would be pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, there's a little bit of smart contract risk. The Jito SOL stake pool has been audited like 7 times. Solana Labs wrote it, so feeling pretty confident about that. But like, other than that, it's like kind of superior in basically every way. Another thing is like I'm not a financial advisor or whatever, but you should talk to your lawyer. But there's not financial advice. But there's also potential like tax benefits as well, because like I think every liquid staked token on Solana is reward bearing. So if you are staking, you're getting rewards like airdropped or minted to your wallet or whatever the legal jargon is for it. And some people might view that as taxable, where with liquid staking token, it's accruing in the price of the liquid staking token. So there might be some tax benefits there as well.
That's a little bit of alpha there. In terms of, I would say, I 100% agree with you. I mean, what ultimately you've built is in every way pretty much more advantageous to the end user than just directly staking to a validator. You're also getting those MEV rewards. I think the only thing when I talk with people about Jito, or not Jito specifically, but the type of kind of MEV collection is typically around the smart contract risks and some of the potential pitfalls that ultimately introduce to the people that are listening. What comfort can you try to bring them? I know you said you've had the client audited 7 times, but is there anything else that can kind of build comfort with people, or is it just a matter of having the protocol be live for an extended period of time so it kind of gets that Lindy effect?
Yeah. I mean, I think all of the things that you mentioned, I think the audits, I think Solana Labs wrote the stake pool implementation. That's what a bunch of the stake pools on Solana use. I think Lido and Marinator are the only ones that have their own bespoke audited implementations. The Solana one's been audited by like 3 or 4 different firms, at multiple points in history. And I think that like that definitely helps a lot. I think that between that and like kind of this like battle tested over time thing that kind of happens with these things, I think that plus like more TVL into these programs will also make people more comfortable with them.
And those juicy rewards from MEV, is that primarily, I mean, I think you mentioned this earlier, just a factor of increased activity, specifically in DeFi, to capture those arbitrages and share those with stakers?
Yeah. So the Jito SOL stake pool only stakes to validators running the Jito Solana validator client. It's a fork of Solana Labs. It's been audited twice so far. We're getting another audit starting tomorrow for 116. And basically that has special code in it to efficiently capture MEV. It's kind of similar to it's similar-ish to like PBS on Ethereum, but essentially it will validators in the stake pool, you have to be running Jito Solana to receive stake from the stake pool, and there's like a minimum amount of MEV that you have to pass on. And I think most MEV right now that we see is like arbitrage, so people arbitraging like Orca and Radium, and there's like we're starting to see more people arbitrage and submit bundles for Drift as well. So I think when you start having all these other like pieces that pop up in the puzzle when you get a new DeFi protocol, and every piece that's added just creates like another like node in this graph that you can make money on. So if you have like this giant web of things that are connected on chain through this like ultimate L1, then there should be more MEV. And then volume, of course, too.
It's pretty fascinating just with how minimal the fees are in Solana. Like some of these strategies that you just mentioned, like multi hops and someone doing an ARB for like $1.30, and that's perfectly profitable on Solana, which is kind of wild to think about. But as you kind of think about the chicken and the egg in terms of like more searchers, more TVL, more stake SOL, and kind of that flywheel, assuming Solana TVL and DeFi, comes back, which is already showing very strong signs of doing so. I think we printed an all-time high for 2023 of TVL like yesterday or the day before. How do you see kind of like the yield evolving? Obviously, like no predictive statements, but there like a upper bound of where it can get, could it approximate that like 20% on Ethereum theoretically over time?
Potentially. I mean, it's really hard to say. I think it will only increase from here as we see more protocols and like more validators running this MEV client and more people like staking to it. I think we'll see the number increase. I think like you can like somewhat approximate MEV as like a function of volume. So like MEV per volume, per dollar volume or whatever. Maybe it's like a few like bips or whatever. So I think comparing it to Ethereum, I think it'll be less just because so far we haven't really seen any sandwiching, which is driving a ton of the Ethereum yield. And then also there's like, for what Kevin was saying earlier, like there's more efficient order books and things like that just expose less MEV to users. So I think it will go up, but I think like MEV per volume will be less than Ethereum.
Which is a good thing too.
Yeah.
Not looking at it from the
100%,
side, but like in a general health factor of the economy of a chain, that's a great thing. I know like most actually I don't want to say most in case it's not most of, but like a lot of the core Ethereum researchers right now are spending a ton of time on MEV prevention. Like that seems to be the biggest, most actionable problem that a lot of the Ethereum community is looking at right now and trying to solve. It's like more than anything else, right? It's captured their mind share. They're like, MEV is really the thing that we need to nip in the bud before it's, for Ethereum to grow in a healthy manner. Which, right, like people can have different opinions on that, right? Like some may think scaling is more important. A lot of them think that MEV is really the main thing. And I think that it's probably because of like the architecture of how Ethereum works in and of itself, right? Like the fact that Solana has less MEV per dollar volume is a function of the actual performance of the chain, right? Like it is doing as much higher throughput and much quicker finality, which allows you to build things like central limit order books that can operate efficiently. If you need to do AMM swaps and there are 12 seconds to go and extract out exactly the total amount of the MEV from that transaction, right? Like it's a much higher percentage of, or it's a much higher proportion of total dollars like being transacted for whatever reason the user wants versus what's actually being extracted out by searchers and other MEV players in the space.
Yeah. I mean, Ethereum's spending a lot of time on it. I think it will like become increasingly more important on Solana, and that's like a conversation that like we're leading right now and we'll continue to like push forward in the future. I don't know if we'll get to like, I don't know if like you can like copy paste PBS. I think PBS has some issues as well. We kind of saw what happened with like Tornado, and you know, Tornado got sanctioned. The Tornado contract got sanctioned by the US government. You had a bunch of like US based block builders that basically were like censoring those transactions, or they wouldn't touch blocks with them, wouldn't build blocks with those. And there's a few other issues with it, but I think, you know, something like PBS could, a variation of PBS could make sense on Solana, taking into account the like latency and things like that.
And the age-old question, Lucas, can you get rid of MEV?
No. No, I mean, I think you can like, you're just like moving it around somewhere else. I think anything you do, like there are people that are like probably smarter and more motivated to make money. Like it's kind of like this like, I can't remember who said this, but it's like kind of like this like energy in the system that you can't get rid of. You can only like move it somewhere else.
Makes sense. On the topic of metrics, I know a lot of people debate, you know, what is the best metric for DeFi, and obviously like TVL is the age-old kind of like power rating of an ecosystem, but it's also a pretty fairly noisy metric. There's been recently some things published by some folks at Solana and other investors in the ecosystem around kind of like a velocity of money type DeFi utilization metric, where it's essentially volume per dollar of TVL. And Solana, while having a quite a modest TVL at this point, given like what's happened and everything, and how new the chain is, it has one of the highest velocity of money DeFi metrics, if not the highest in the world. So what's kind of your take on that and people's reliance and kind of insistence on TVL as like the be all, win all DeFi metric of the world?
Yeah. I think the velocity of money thing's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think the more volume per TVL, you could say that that chain's like more efficient. I think at the same time, though, I think TVL is like one of the most important, maybe disagreeing with them, like the most important thing. I think it's like a very strong trust signal. And, you know, if you look at like DeFi Llama, the chains, and you sort by TVL, the further you get down the list, you're like, that chain's like kind of questionable. When you look at like Ethereum or the L2s, it's like, oh, there's like billions of dollars of capital in these things. Like they are like pretty trusted as like a base layer, and there's a lot of activity and trust in those protocols. So I think velocity of money is another way to measure that, but I do think that like high TVL is good.
I know the industry is heavily kind of focused on the current thing, and it seems like the current thing right now is layer 2s and all the topics around centralized sequencers. Should you decentralize it, fraud proofs, etc.? Do you have any spicy takes on layer 2s in general?
Oh man. I mean, I think I have the similar takes to everyone in Solana about them, or any like high throughput chain enjoyer. It's kind of frustrating having like the same arguments or like disagreements over and over on Twitter. I think, you know, it's like the same conversation of like some L2 maxi or whatever saying Solana's centralized. And then you say, oh, what about your L2s that you're like depending on the scale? And then it's kind of just like crickets. It's like the same conversation over and over again. So I think it's pretty frustrating. I think the like ETH community is kind of like compromised on a lot of their vision to like push these L2s. And we'll see what happens. I think there's a lot of smart people working on L2s and like, you know, they can do whatever they want. But I think that like the ETH community is kind of compromised a lot on this like decentralization narrative in support of L2s. And that's just kind of like sad to see.
I love to throw at the risk of getting bashed publicly to try to like summarize both arguments and kind of where they stop, right? Maybe we can add a little bit more color to that. I think the current argument, right, is like essentially Solana says that they're more decentralized than L2s. And then L2s say like, yeah, but down the line, we will become more decentralized. And then at the base layer, Ethereum is more decentralized. So like at the end of the day, once everything is built out, then we will have the objective advantage, right? Like if you're saying how decentralized it is right now, you're taking a short-sighted view, like your one data point is today, and we're building towards a future. I think something that adds a little bit more color to that would be, at what rate do you think L2s will be able to decentralize? And then does Solana outpace that, right? So if their argument is 2 years from now will be decentralized, it's like, well, where could Solana get to over the course of 2 years?
Yeah.
And then if it's still more decentralized, right, then that's a different conversation to be had.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, there's a lot of like ways that conversations are twisted from both sides to meet whatever like narrative they're matching. It's like Solana's not decentralized. So L2s are centralized. Oh, people are working on that. Like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting. I know that like Solana from like the like, it gets a lot of, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, you need like a ton of compute to run a Solana validator and all this stuff. But it's like, that's going to get way better over time. Like even 116 and 117, the next kind of releases that should be coming online like the next month or two are way more efficient. So I think, you know, the goal of Solana is to like use every like transistor and like circuit in a computer as efficiently as possible. And like they also had to kind of build this plane while they were taking off. I don't think they like anticipated what would have happened during the last bull run as far as like the adoption and spam and MEV and all this stuff. So like kind of just made the most of it and like continued to ship. And now, you know, I think they have the breathing room to like, or they've been working on this whole time, but probably have a little more breathing room to like continue making things more efficient, you know, dropping the memory requirements. There's a lot of improvements to make in Gossip to bring the traffic down. There's teams working on like light clients and things like this. So I think, you know, on that spectrum, Solana will only continue to get better, not worse.
And kind of on that front, you're one of the people, at least like, you know, in the ecosystem, people think of you as one of the builders that kind of knows the Solana code the best outside of the core Solana devs. what's your take on Firedancer and the Solana 2.0 narrative and everything that that's going to bring for the chain, kind of, you know, as it relates to MEV and your business, or just more broadly?
Yeah. Yeah, super bullish Firedancer. I think like those guys are just like cracked out engineers, and you know, they are like thinking about hardware and like the embedded system context that I kind of come from, and but like even more on steroids, like where do we put our, like, what core do we run this thread on, and like where is the memory that it's using, like we need this the shortest circuit from this core to this memory. So, and then like how do we keep the processor running at max throughput, like worry about all these the data pipeline and instruction pipelines and all this stuff. So I think it will be way more efficient than the current labs validator. I think yeah, I think it probably is fair to call it Solana 2.0. I might get shit for this, maybe some angry DMs, but
Let's
I
start
think,
the narrative.
yeah,
2.0.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it kind of depends on like what validators do. I think, you know, all these networks are driven by incentives. So if you offer, it's similar to like the MEV validator clients, like, hey, run this, you'll earn a little bit extra stake, help the network run more efficiently. If it runs more efficiently, you'll see more DeFi activity, more volumes, more fees, more money, all that stuff. So I think if you dangle the right incentives in front of validators like Firedancer, you know, maybe it'll run on hardware that's 50% cheaper. Maybe it can run at like 10x or 100x the throughput. Then, you know, you could see a lot of validators switch over to that.
No, it's super exciting. I think one of the things that Logan and I are most excited about with Solana is just the fact that it scales with hardware, and there's brilliant engineers innovating every day around multi-core performance. There's like optical GPUs now that are transferring data that way. And even some of like, I know it's kind of a meme, but like the LK99 room temperature ambient superconductor stuff, and the potential there eventually for like a breakthrough in compute, right? And you think about all these super clever engineers and material scientists like working day and night to innovate there, and then Solana being positioned as kind of one of the few chains that's taking the most benefit out of those advancements in hardware, which is pretty exciting. But on that note, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention our sponsor, Monad. They're also a next generation blockchain building a high performance EVM, and was wondering if you had any takes on how that kind of shakes up the dynamic. I mean, Ethereum obviously has a mempool, Solana doesn't. How would kind of MEV on a high performance EVM chain look?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics about Monad's architecture. Well, I know like bits and pieces of it. I know that like Kiani and the rest of the team are like super fucking smart, and you know, I'm sure they'll come up with something great. I think they seem to be like, I guess before I get into MEV, I think they seem to be super focused on community already, which I think is like super important for these L1s. I think they're also leveraging EVM, which, you know, I'm more of a fan of the SVM, but you know, the EVM does have a large moat. So I think, you know, leveraging that will be nice. It will be interesting to see if they have to play the ETH alignment game or if they can just get away from that. But I think super excited about Monad. I think, yeah, I guess TBD on what it looks like from MEV standpoint. I don't know, you know, how frequently the leader rotates, if they're going to go with a mempool or something else, some other like data structure to do that. There'll probably be like a MEV company that comes along and builds MEV software for it. I'm sure they, you know, there's a lot of like, maybe not case studies, but there's just a lot of lot more knowledge about MEV than there was a few years ago, and different things that you can do and the different ways that people are leveraging MEV to like extract money. So I think I'm sure that's like MEV is like top of mind for Monad.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit of color as well. So like the consensus and execution mechanism are decoupled, so they're happening asynchronously, which allows basically the execution to occupy the entire block time, as well as the validation, and yeah, rotating leader set. So yeah, I think the like instant finality on that front, along with like the performance side, exactly we were talking about, right? Like you can create dApps, like just having a central limit order book and having that be the main way that people are trading into like super tight spreads that are being quoted by high frequency trading firms should mitigate a lot of the MEV off the bat. I would imagine it looks pretty similar to Solana in that boat.
Yeah,
but it also depends what takes off the most within the ecosystem, right? Like I think early on, like I'm thinking of like August 2021, Solana had this idea in their head for so long that Solana is going to be the NASDAQ of blockchains. That's like the core use case. And then like degenatements and like all the NFTs that kind of like took over the chain, at least in terms of like an attention share. They kind of had to adapt to that, right? In like different forms. If MEV was a thing at that point, it probably would have been like being the first to mint out all of these NFTs and then go and sell them, right? So I think you need to wait. Like we'll see how the ecosystem matures, but I would guess that it'll look more similar to Solana's from an MEV standpoint.
I'm super curious. Yeah, there's a bunch of different technical architectures, and I'm excited that someone is really building a parallelized EVM from the ground up, because to me that was my biggest problem with the Ethereum virtual machine, is that you couldn't do parallelization and you couldn't tap into kind of compute how it's been designed for. And the fact that Keone was also at Jump, I think speaks volumes. But
yeah, but there's a lot of other cool stuff that I think they're working on too, like different storage architectures and things like that are other like major bottlenecks in the EVM. So
definitely
looking forward to your guys' testnet, and should be cool to see that off the ground and see what it can do.
I'm curious though, Lucas, if someone was kind of watching like just one segment of the podcast or of this, what is one takeaway that you would either want them to learn about either Jito, the client that you're building, MEV, or I'd say crypto more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to choose one, I think I would say that like Solana is the best place to build DeFi products right now. I think it's like the fastest, cheapest, highest throughput L1 out there right now, and great place to build. There's a lot of like good tooling coming out, and you don't have to worry about high fees for your users or anything like that. It's just this like ultimate liquidity. Shared the Kyle was on podcast the other day. It's like just this like giant piece of like shared state that anyone can access. And I think, yeah, Solana's DeFi is coming back super strong, and looking forward to seeing more builders on it.
The narrative is changing rather quickly.
Yeah, it's cool to see from the like inside how fast it's changing.
I think we're gonna look back on this podcast like a year or two from now, and Lucas is gonna say DeFi and Solana's coming back, and you're gonna be like, no kidding. But no, it's been a great podcast. I think some great insights, and it was great hearing you answer some of these questions. Last thing we wanted to do was just give folks an opportunity, if they want to get involved with Jito, if they're a developer, if they are looking to run a searcher and generate MEV, or if they just have a bunch of Solana and they're kind of deciding where to stake, how can they get involved?
Yeah, so Jito Labs website, jito.wtf. there's information for searchers, stakers, and validators. So if you're a validator, you want to run the MEV client, help the network scale, earn some money, check that out. If you're a searcher, if you're doing market making or arbitrage or want access to state faster, check out the searcher section. And then if you're interested in contributing to Solana DeFi, you want to mint a liquid staking token, go participate in providing liquidity and all that, you can go to jito.network.
Amazing. Well, you heard it here, folks. First, folks, I think a year from now, Jito Firedancer client is going to be the gold standard. That's my prediction. I think that's going to be absolutely everywhere. And yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for coming through. And yeah, keep cracking on, guys. Only better days ahead.
True that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, much appreciated, Lucas.